Hey guys, so I'll admit it, I messed up. Tried to tint my tail lights. I was too eager, too lazy to do it the right way. Now I'm gonna show you what I did wrong so you don't make the same mistakes.
Or don't make these mistakes.
And we can take a look step by step at what mistakes I made, how I'm gonna undo it, how we're gonna redo it the right way. Let's take a look at the tools now that we're going to use to do this project. Had a couple microfiber cloths for cleaning, paper towel, glass cleaner, Goo Gone. We've got these squeegees that we use to apply it. This is a cutter tool as well as a box cutter type tool. Now this kit came with the latest batch of tint that I ordered, and it just came with one squeegee, two of these felt pads, which I assume you're supposed to apply yourself, and then this cutter slash stuffer inner tool. We're also going to need either a heat gun or a hair dryer. Heat guns are pretty cheap. This is my wife's hair dryer. From what I know, it's pretty expensive, so your best bet's probably, if you don't have a hair dryer or a good quality hair dryer, go with a cheap $20 or $30 heat gun from Walmart or your local hardware store.
Pro tip.
Make sure to unravel your tint film before you're doing the project. It comes in rolls, so it's pretty tight and hard to cut and hard to work with when it's all coiled up. So if you can, you have something heavy, such as these water bottles, paint cans, whatever you have, just lay it down the night before and let it sit overnight so it's easy to work with. Okay, here we see the tint job. This side came out pretty well, and I'll tell you why I think it did, because it's a much simpler object, a much flatter object. So you can see here some of the problems I had, and I'll go ahead and open the trunk so you can see. This shape is such a complex shape that it's very difficult to stretch the tint film around it without getting bubbles. And so as a result, I ended up using a lot of heat. I think I heated it up too many times because I screwed it up too many times. I ended up trying to cut out a portion here to replace it. But of course you see it just where it met, it didn't adhere very well and ended up starting to peel. Okay guys, so let's go over the mistakes I made one more time.
Don't make these mistakes.
First, it was that I did it on a windy day. It's pretty windy today, so I'm a little concerned. Secondly, I used too much heat in those areas where I had a hard time getting it to the film to conform to the shape of the light. I ended up pulling it off and replacing it, and each time you do that, you add a little bit of heat to help the film heal itself. You can only do it so many times in a row before it starts to make the film brittle. And that goes hand in hand with the next mistake, which was not removing the tail light from the body. So you want to apply from the middle and work your way outside, and when it's about 90% done or so, remove the tail light from the body, and that'll allow us to wrap the film around. As you can see, I've prepped the trunk for removal of the tail lights. I go over that in another one of my videos, the turn his tail video. You can click to view that now if you need a quick refresher on how to prepare the car, but it involves taking off this piece of trim, pulling back the carpeted pieces of the side that just allow you to get back there. I've also removed these trim pieces using a trim tool that allow us to get to these two bolts, which I think are pretty much all you need to remove the tail light. It just relies on these little, I believe it's this blue one, as well as a brown one up here. So we can get a good look at those. Okay, so before we get started, a couple of other things that I didn't mention. Always use gloves. That was another mistake that I made the first time around. Also, I'm going to be using these tweezers to get to those little stubborn spots. And before we start, we're going to give it a good blast of heat to help make the film a little more malleable, more pliable, and that should help us to be able to get the film off a little bit easier. Okay, so we got it off, and as you can see, it was pretty easy coming off once I got some of the tougher edges, the ones that didn't want to come undone. Once I got those taken care of, it kind of came apart in one nice big piece. It was oddly satisfying, like peeling an orange and getting a really big piece of skin off the orange, or I know you're thinking it, I'm just gonna say it, like peeling that skin off a sunburn. So anyways, something oddly enjoyable about taking that tint film off. Anyway, so pretty easy. I'm gonna move on to the other side, we'll get that done, and then move on to the other step. Okay guys, so now that we've got the old film off, we're gonna prepare the taillights to receive the new film. And as part of that, we're gonna use these products here. It's just some glass cleaner, microfiber cloth, some Goo Gone to make sure any adhesive or any gunk comes off, and of course some paper towels. So let's go through that two-step cleaning process now. Okay, a couple of other things before we get to cleaning these is, if you do use paper towel, make sure not to touch the paint of the car with the paper towel. Even though it looks soft, it's actually quite abrasive. So if you end up rubbing it into the finish on your paint, you could potentially get scratches and ruin your paint. So I do recommend the microfiber cloths. Those are the better tool, but this will work if that's all you have. Make sure to get the edges really well. Those are the parts that will collect dust and where the adhesive kind of came off the original tint. So keep that in mind, and we'll go from there. Okay, so this roll of film is actually 60 inches long, or 5 feet. So what we're gonna do is cut it in half so we know how much we have to work with for each headlight. So it's 60 inches by 16 inches, and we'll just cut it right down here, down the middle. And that's where either your special film cutting tool, or you could just use plain old box cutter, X-Acto knife, whatever you have around. I prefer this, it's really quite easy to use. Lift up where you want to cut it, get it in the slot, kind of hold it down, and then just push. And there you go, a nice straight quick cut. The quicker the better. If you hesitate, it's going to end up wobbly, but if you do it nice and quick, it'll go straight. Okay, we're ready to start getting our film on our taillights, and before we get started, I wanted to share a few lessons that I learned with you from the last time that I did it. So, as I mentioned before, this taillight is a rather complicated shape. It's got curves, it's got angles, it's got angled curves, and all of the above. So it was quite a challenge to get it to go over these complicated areas nice and smoothly without any air bubbles. And I think that's where I tripped up last time, was having to pull it off and replace it using heat each time. And the excessive amount of heat on it caused it to be brittle. So we're trying not to repeat that this time. So we're gonna start here on a less complicated area and work our way around to the more complicated area, all the while stretching the film to the floor and ceiling as much as we can as we work our way over with a squeegee. Okay, so we have it done now. The film is on the tail lamp and as smooth as I could possibly get it. An extra step that I didn't mention before, you may have seen me in the time lapse with a needle poking the little extra bubbles. So any bubbles that I couldn't get out, I poked with a needle from the underside. And I poked from the underside for two reasons. One, so that when I squeegeed out the air, it would all go the same direction. It was easier to empty the bubble of air that way. And two, because if this were to get wet or rain or car wash water were to get on it, the rain would flow downwards and thus have a harder time getting into the needle hole, which is coming from the bottom. So that helped. You can do that if you're a perfectionist like me. It's still not 100% perfect, but it's about 98% and better than what it was before, so I'm pretty happy with it. So let's go ahead and install it now, and we'll go from there. Okay, one final thing we need to do is to cut off some of this excess here so that the trim piece can fit back on. So we'll go ahead and cut off some of this. Okay guys, so this is what it looks like all wrapped up with the hood closed. Pretty happy with it. So I think that's gonna stay quite a bit better than the job I did before. I'm glad I spent more time on it this time. Again, there are a couple of imperfections, but I can live with them. It looks pretty good. Save some money for doing it yourself. It is a long and tedious process, as you can tell. The results are good, and you'll probably save a couple $100 by doing it yourself. So going to move on to the other side now, and then we will wrap it up.